Like most YouTubers, I wanted to give my take on the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, for the last 2 months, everyone's been piling it on to John Walker, and I certainly didn't want to miss out on that. He reeks of entitlement, he's been handed everything, he has a crazy amount of power, his friends do nothing but gas him up, he never gets any real consequences, and he's got a jawline that people just wanna. Yeah, you get it, John. John Walker was a character crafted for people to hate, and people have found no difficulty doing that. But in this video, I wanted to talk about his relationship surrounding race and some of the coded language that the show uses around him and through him, which I believe actually reveals the worldview of the show and sheds more light on what the show believes is good about Sam Wilson and Steve Rogers. I'll actually be doing that exclusively with the second episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, The Star Spangled Man. This is the first episode where John Walker's character actually does anything besides walk out and reveal himself as the most punchable man in the MCU. There are 3 major scenes with John Walker in this episode, and I'm going to analyze the first one, then the third one, and then the second one, because I believe that's the most coherent way to look at these scenes. Just for context, shows and movies have 2 ways of showing you what they believe. The first is called overt messaging, or what I like to call Jurassic Park messaging. Because in Jurassic Park, you don't have to interpret what the movie thinks. They'll just tell you.
I'm simply saying that life, finds a way.
But overt messaging is when you just have a character in the show say what the director or the screenwriter thinks, and the show does its best to emphasize this moment. It's pretty tough to miss.
They will never let a black man be Captain America.
The second way of communicating is from latent messaging. That's when you don't say what you think, but instead you use every available tool to make the audience think what you're thinking. In essence, you trick them into thinking according to your worldview. Now, this is what commercials and campaigns do all the time. They use symbols, symbolic language, evocative language to make you think according to what they want you to think. Now, it's not like every show or movie has to choose between overt or latent messaging. They can, and normally do, use both, and that's the case for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But on my second watch of this show, I was noticing that it was tending to go episode by episode, where some episodes lean on overt messaging.
I'm a black man carrying the stars and stripes. What don't I understand?
And others tend to lean on latent messaging. I thought that the first episode of the series was pretty overt.
Symbols are nothing without the women and men that give them meaning.
Where I noticed that the second episode was using almost entirely latent messaging. And that's what I want to look at today, decoding the latent messaging around John Walker. Let's get into it. The first scene is of John Walker at his high school. This is our first look at John Walker, and in it, he's coming off as pretty sympathetic. He's intimidated by the situation, he's worried that he won't be able to live up to the mantle, and he leans on his support system, his girlfriend and his best friend, to get him through the day. But even a regular viewer might notice what's going on with representation in this scene. It appears clear to me that the show is encoding a message with who's surrounding John. Everyone is black. John has a black girlfriend, a black best friend, he's supported by a black marching band, and he has a majority black high school. John is nothing if not supported by his black community, who's very proud of him for taking on the mantle of Captain America. What could Kerry Skoglund and the creators have meant by surrounding John with black characters everywhere in his first scene? I had 2 thoughts as I watched it, and I don't view them as mutually exclusive. The first is that I thought Marvel was making a little bit of a caricature of its past representation in the MCU, where we have almost entirely white protagonists who are supported by black sidekicks and side characters who do very little besides unwaveringly support them. Iron Man has Rhodey, Captain America has Sam. Without Iron Man or Captain America, there wouldn't be Sam or Rhodey. I thought that this scene kind of took that idea of the white protagonist and the black supporting character and turned it up to 11 to show how ridiculous that can look. It shows a white protagonist type character surrounded by a black community who unwaveringly and unquestioningly gas John Walker up. That was my first thought on the scene. My second thought is that the point of this scene is to make you feel a little uncomfortable with the power dynamics that are at play. And they do so by showing black characters everywhere, in John's life, in the stands, in the band. But in this scene, who actually has a voice? Just John and the reporter. They're in a black community, but it's also an uncritical look at who John Walker is. And the only voices that are able to be heard are John and this reporter who's also there to gas him up. The end result, or the sum of this scene, is that it ends up coming across as though something is a little bit off, even though there's nothing clearly wrong at play here. It's a black high school that's unwaveringly supporting someone wearing the stars and stripes because he's part of the community. But the way the scene is laid out and the representation at play makes you feel like something's not quite right because of how uncritical the characters are and how uncritical the scene is with the symbol of Captain America and how it's being interpreted. The creator is giving entire autonomy to the audience to feel this and provide this, where they're presenting the shield and the stars and stripes as a beacon of multiculturalism and diversity, without a critical look at what that means. That's on the audience to feel the discomfort. And so that's the first scene, and it doesn't mean much without the whole narrative that surrounds it. And so let's take a look at the third scene and some of the symbols that it provides. The last scene with John Walker in this episode takes place outside a government building after Bucky and Sam have had a couples therapy session. They've been released because of the intervention of John Walker, who wants their help solving the case of the Flag Smashers. John Walker doesn't have superpowers at this point, and he also doesn't have technology that helps him in combat like Tony Stark, Sam Wilson, or War Machine. So what is John Walker's superpower? His superpower is that he has the entire government working for him. He has all the state power that no one else has, and that's what he's trying to use to his advantage to solve this case. What is he? He's a cop. And how does John Walker want to be thought of by Sam and Bucky? We'll take a look at how he gets their attention when they walk out of the government building.
Well, I feel better.
I feel awful.
Gentlemen.
Sam just had a horrible encounter with a cop, and Bucky just got arrested for missing a court-mandated therapy. If he didn't intend on confronting them, this is the worst way to get someone's attention after a horrible day. This is coded messaging from Kerry Skoglund and the creators, that they could have had John and Hoskins get their attention any way they wanted, yelling at them, whistling at them, calling their phone, but it chose to blare the police sirens to indicate to Sam and Bucky that they needed to come over to John. And from there it gives us a pretty clean-cut buddy cop rivalry conversation. This series hit just about every buddy cop trope, two people that got assigned to work together having to solve a huge case, racing against a rival set of cops that are trying to solve it faster, and this conversation ends on that exact point. Sam and Bucky don't want to solve the case using the law, because the law won't make things better. For John, he has no option than to use the law. It's the only card he has to play, and so he ends it with the ultimate cop saying.
A word of advice then. Stay the hell out of my way.
The show never said anything about John being a cop. It never had to. It just hit every trope and every symbol for us to know exactly what it's getting at. John's a bad, irresponsible, insecure cop who shouldn't have the amount of power that he has. And that's what the show is using coded messages to tell us. Scene 2. This is the scene that defines the whole thing. The scene that tells you everything you need to know about who John is and his view of other people. It's the scene where John and Hoskins show up to pick Sam and Bucky up. I think it's pretty on the nose that the layout of the scene is playing with race as well as power dynamics. Where we kind of know that Sam is calling the shots and Bucky is along for the ride at this time in their fight against the Flag Smashers. And so this scene sets up with John and Hoskins on one side and Sam and Bucky on the other side. The white superhero with the black sidekick and the black hero with the white sidekick. In this scene, we see Sam and Bucky get out of the car and walk to the airport for different reasons. Bucky gets offended by Hoskins for who he is and what he represents as someone helping Captain America.
I'm Battlestar, Star Spangled.
Battlestar? Stop the car!
I think this has to do with Hydra, the fact that Bucky wore a star and killed people for decades. Bucky's identity is formed around his relationship to Steve Rogers, so for someone to call themselves Battlestar and boast their relationship to Captain America with the idea of the name Battlestar being cute is really offensive to Bucky. He sees Hoskins as an egotistical and irreverent version of what he used to be. Right after Bucky gets out, we see a dialogue exchange between Walker and Sam that I think defines all of who John Walker is.
I get it, okay? I get the attitude, I do. You didn't think that the shield was gonna end up here, I get it, Bucky. And I'm not trying to be Steve. I'm just trying to be the best Captain America I can be. That's it. It'd be a whole lot easier if I had Cap's wingman on my side. It's always that last line.
Walker doesn't wonder what Sam thinks about the ethics of their mission. He doesn't wonder what Sam thinks about John taking the shield. He doesn't care about who Sam is as a person. He believes that Sam would be best suited fighting for him. In the mind of John Walker, everyone's job is to serve John Walker uncritically. Now that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with race, but in the show and in this context, it does. Because he took the shield from someone who was offered to be a black Captain America and turned it down. John is thinking about Sam race neutrally, but Sam isn't thinking about himself race neutrally, and so John isn't worried about what Sam thinks about himself. And what logic does John Walker appeal to get people to serve him?
I'm just trying to be the best Captain America I can be.
And I don't want to fail them. To think, how did a guy like me end up here?
Oh, wait. A guy like me, somebody's being a bit too humble.
I only ever did what you asked of me, what you told me to be and trained me to do, and I did it. And I did it well.
John has been using the I'm a good guy, I'm trying my best argument his whole life, and it's gotten people to support him way beyond what it should have. John has been given nearly unlimited power as Captain America, and with that power, he's not worried about what that means for the Flag Smashers, what that means for Sam and Bucky, how he might listen to them, how he might be made better by them, how he might help them be better versions of themselves. I mean, that's what Steve Rogers did. He's really only interested in what Bucky and Sam can offer him, which is more legitimacy as Captain America. And I think that that's why the show is interested in his relationship to his community in the first scene. It surrounds him with black characters, a black girlfriend, a black sidekick. And it's not that these relationships are any less legitimate or less authentic, but it's there to show you that John isn't interested in what he can offer to his community. He's only interested in what they can offer him, which is power and legitimacy. The whole episode was using a lot of iconography to talk about race. Sam being confronted by the police, the Flag Smashers running at the military and being shot, Isaiah Bradley telling them how he feels. I think that John Walker is kind of a meta statement on what the MCU is not trying to be in this era. They're not trying to use black characters solely to meet diversity standards and never offer them autonomy as characters. John Walker is a version of what it can look like at its worst, surrounded by diversity, but only using that to serve yourself. I don't think that Marvel has by any means done a perfect job of that, but I really like the start that they've gotten off to with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And granted, one show certainly doesn't equate to the interest of the entire cinematic universe, but I will say that the people that are in charge at Marvel appear to be aware of the significance that this issue has to the world as a whole. I certainly hope that they stick with this effort. I'm Shep Papelka, and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is one of my favorite shows.